I will mute ourselves and it should be going any moment.
Okay.
Gentlemen, you can start now. I think we are streaming, so.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Kelly. I'm Principal Analyst at Appledore Research and also your moderator for today's session. Today's session is building your own cloud native edge network, some of the challenges and initiatives. With me today, I have Larry Peterson. He's the CTO of the ONF, the Open Networking Foundation. We will also have Saad Sheikh, who's Chief Architect of Saudi Telecom, joining us momentarily. He's in the process of joining the webcast. Larry, I'm going to start with you as we wait for Saad, but let's briefly discuss the architecture of cloud native in the context of edge deployments and how it changes the design, build, and deployment model.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, the good news is that cloud native is pretty well defined in terms of best practices and a wealth of open source components, though. So there's no obvious recipe out there, but once you start down this path of you realize you're running microservices, so you're running Docker, you're managing those containers with Kubernetes. You're going to need to monitor whatever's running on your edge cluster. So you're going to be running various data collection tools, Prometheus to collect the data in a database. There's Grafana as a dashboard. You're going to need a log. So you're going to be running, there's an elk stack. So the point is there's a pretty well-defined set of best practices for pulling a bunch of, I'm now talking open source components together. If it's an edge, there's probably multiple edges, so you're going to need some kind of management of all of those edges. And again, there's a set of tools open source tools out there. Rancher's an example. But the point is that to run cloud native does come with some implications that you are adhering to these best practices because the services that you're going to run at the edge are being packaged and distributed as Docker containers, and they're being configured using Helm. So those templates are already there. So in that respect, it's all reasonably well defined. The challenge, of course, is you've got to pull all these parts together and decide what edge services you want to run. I think the really interesting thing here from a telco point of view is how you include or embed 4G or 5G in that edge deployment. So there is where things are still a little unsettled. We're building an edge cloud at ONF, and we're actually eating our own dog food and operating. We're an open source consortium, but just to get the experience, we are operating this edge cloud. We call it Ether because it's the operationalization of this thing that's the real challenge. And in that setting, we have a split RAN, and we are running small cells. And because we aren't an operator and don't own any license, we're using CBRS spectrum. We have a mobile core, and this is where things get interesting as well. We have the user plane of the mobile core runs at the edge, and that's really, really important because then you can get local breakout, and anything that comes in on the cellular network gets doesn't have to go all the way back up into the cloud. It can stay entirely at the edge. We then run the control plane for the mobile core out in the cloud. We run it in Google Cloud. It could run anywhere. So again, it's still at the stage that different organizations are pulling these solutions together, and there's an ecosystem growing. But it's pretty well defined up until you figure out exactly how you're going to deploy the 5G RAN. Hopefully that'll get us started.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Ed, thanks for joining us. We're just getting started. I introduced you, and maybe we'll have you weigh in. The initial question for the panel session was how things change in terms of the design and build out in developing an edge cloud. We'd like to get your perspective. We just, Larry sort of went through some of the fundamental changes, but as somebody implementing this in the marketplace, would like your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And actually, for this edge, before we go how to build this edge and how it is natively different than our current practices, right? It's very important. Let's define the edge, right? This edge for what, right? Principally, we see there are different flavors and requirements of edge, and in different markets there will be distinctly different nature of this edge. So it's very important to build this type of solution in an open way, which can be tuned, scaled to the requirements, and it can deliver the many verticals, not in the traditional telco sense where it is stitched with a particular solution, right? So for us, if I put a software architect's hat on, right, we all know, right, we are trying to build, I should say somehow it's a reinvention of an internet, right, where we try to build this edge in a pure production style, not as a, you can say, coverage or a capacity style, right? So today, who are doing it, right? We should take an example. Hyperscalers are doing it. We see the software companies. We see the example of Disney. We see, Kubernetes. There are a lot of good examples. The companies adopting Netflix is one of the famous examples. So software architectures of microservice. This, I think, is something. And what are the characteristics of this microservices, right? Somehow we all know that edge is a constrained environment. That's not a cattle ranch, right? It has a lot of limitations. And the fact is this: today, as we are building and testing solutions, the most important thing is this microservice or the open software view is helping us to counterfeit the implications, or you can say limitations of the edge. For example, we know the autonomy, right? We know that the scalability itself, because we want to consume whichever box is there, whichever cloud, even maybe an enterprise. So the solution should not be something that is stitched to what our own flavor of on-prem, right? Then we all know the limitations on the bandwidth and security, as well as the latency, this bandwidth, limitation of the bandwidth, which require a NAS view. So somehow what we see, it's very important to tackle those challenges in a software way. Because obviously this physical constraint we cannot overcome. So that's the way we are approaching the market and delivering our solutions.
So if I could just
go ahead, Larry.
If I could, yeah, excuse me, if I would just sort of amplify one of the points. I think that one of the biggest things is this is now a cloud. It has limited capacity, but it is not a point solution. It is by design extensible with whatever services I want to load on it, and that's going to change over time. And from our point of view of having worked with a number of operators to take open source commodity hardware and combine it in a way that is a solution, up to this point, those solutions have still just been a re-implementation of the devices that had already been there, right? So yes, it's a white box implementation. Yes, it was open source software, but it's still a BNG, or it's still a PON network. And so it's a very device and narrow definition. Well, I think the biggest architectural change with what's going on now at the edge, at the enterprise, and so on, is that, the operators are now having to build, or the space is about building clouds as opposed to building different implementations of devices.
Yeah. Let's look at things in terms of edge computing, because I think, Said, you were talking about different parts of the edge. So you might have near edge, you might have far edge. If you look at edge computing, one of the obvious advantages is working in an environment where applications are latency sensitive. If you look at the IoT domain, you're seeing data being pushed from cameras, from sensors, from robotics that that data needs to be processed faster at the source. So what do you see in your region, where you're serving your customers? What type of real world deployments are they looking for from you that really fundamentally change your plans for deployment in what you've done, comparing it to what you've done in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good perspective, because as I said, use case is very important to bring these edge solutions to the market. So before nudging into the use cases, it's very important today where we are constructing our edge, right? We all see as telecom operators, edge is an extension to our infrastructure. So somehow, once we see the edge, the last mile, there is a co-location exchanges. Not every, but we find a synergy in terms of transport, in terms of connectivity, like in other words, in the traditional telco sense, which were the aggregation points, right? So this is one of the points where we are trying to bring solutions. And the other point is synergized with our 5G rollout. We all know that we are moving towards the open solutions at the 5G. We have put some CRAN already, and we are trying to move to open. And so the synergy of this RAN side together with the open RAN and edge, that is exactly where we are trying to host something, right? In terms of use cases, again, we are focusing on the quick win for the market, okay? Today, we have actually three streams where we are trying to fulfill our customer requirements. The first is the consumer and the enterprise, okay? In consumer, we all know the video is very hot service in this region, and video gaming and CDN, and similarly for the low latency enterprise applications, which you can say the smart buildings or which the monitoring solutions, right? This is one of the things for which is already, we think the infrastructure is in place, and we have some nailed down good solutions. The other most important direction is some government initiatives like the smart city projects, right? In this context, we certainly see the public safety and the smart city, the video surveillance, all this category, right? Where we are trying to build the solution, smart Hajj event management. This is something, there is projects in the pipeline where we are trying to build solutions. And the third segment, which is obviously very important, is industry vertical. This is somehow we are streaming together with the 3GPP release 16, right? Still, we have the 6 months window, and we are not trying to approach it purely from the edge perspective, because, we are trying to make use of the 5G campus, the features like the TSN and the 5G LAN. So somehow, because for the value proposition, it's very important for us to hit the nail of synergy of the two together. For this, I think there's a huge potential, especially in the private 5G in this context. So this is the third thing which we hope soon we are trying to focus and build something. So that's how we are seeing this market emerging along.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that insight, Larry. Let me come back to you. One of the things you initially alluded to is the opportunity around 5G. How much decomposition of the network functions do you think is reasonable in a 5G access environment where you're deploying an edge cloud?
Yeah, great question. And it's still early, but as many are on, layer 1, 2, 3 would be aware, the major carriers are pursuing a split RAN. So there's the radio unit, the distributed unit. Sometimes those then are combined in small, especially in the small cell setting, which is particularly interesting at the edge in the enterprise. And then the central unit. So what we're seeing right now is we're building out on-prem edge clouds that include the central unit. And then again, in the enterprise, it's small cell. So this would be different than if you were deploying it in macro cells. But in that setting, the central unit entirely runs in software in the edge, in the very same cloud that the IoT app or whatever it is you're running at the edge runs. The other important thing that I mentioned before is that the user plane, you have to have the user plane of the core also running at the edge. Otherwise, because you want the local breakout so that when the sensor or the IoT device or whatever it is starts communicating with the edge app, it doesn't have to go back upstream. It's entirely stays on-prem.
Right, right.
Now, from a management point of view, you probably would want them to pull the control plane of the core out into some central location because that control plane is now managing perhaps multiple edge sites. Yeah, so I think that's probably roughly going to be the configuration that we see.
Okay, great. That's good insight, Larry. Let me ask both of you, how do you see the supplier and partner ecosystem adapting to an edge cloud deployment? So if you look at your, and I guess Sud, I'll start with you. If you look at your existing suppliers, does that ecosystem change for you as you look to an edge deployment with some of the new architectures that we're talking about and also new technologies coming into your environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a make or break for the edge, right? Because somehow we are adopting a cloud journey. It's almost 3-4 years right now. And we understand how ecosystem plays and what are the roles. But somehow, due to just the scale of the edge, we think there will be huge requirements to understand and control it. And because somehow, going with a pre-integrated or a silo deployment is no longer an option. And one of the prime reasons is because, for example, during the last year or so, we have done, I think, at least 4 or 5 different combinations of this edge. And one of the key lessons that we have learned, different platform or the edge providers will come with the different tool sets and also different partner preferences. That makes it very difficult to maintain a ubiquitous developer experience. Somehow, I think this is of the main reason why we have not been very successful to attract the developer. So somehow, if we have to solve this, it's very important to focus on this stream. But the question is how we can achieve this, right? Because especially in the telco community, we have not been very successful in the past. I think this is something where we want to obviously should take more responsibility to align the interests and, because different players at the end of the day, we know the vendors, they join these communities, right? And they push that they are very open. But ultimately, when it comes on ground, they come with their own tailored product, which somehow, I always used to say, they call it open plus, right? So somehow we should promote, we need an open system, we should not prioritize something like open plus. But there is one other dimension I should mention. The ecosystem definition of edge is very different because you see, we are not owning all sites. Maybe there is a new roles emerging. For example, you can say the connectivity exchanges, physical sites. Developer onboarding, maybe as pure software companies which we call as the API connectors, right? Then we see some governor bodies, for example, how to sell this, right? Eventually, if we build it, okay, everything is fine. How we will actually sell this, go to the market. So there is a different type of ecosystem evolving in different directions. And that is why it's very important to work very closely. And again, on this direction, because this question somehow come to us a number of times, the role of hyperscalers. We all know they are very good. They're just too good in this. In enterprise, they have done some. So I think they should come forward to help define a global standard, give their inputs from their experience. And this will really help the telcos to build a framework which is of global scale. That is very important to have a common terms across the whole ecosystem and place each player in the right value chain. So that is how we actually see this evolving and moving forward. Yeah.
So that would presume that you would actually develop partnerships both with other communication service providers as well as hyperscale cloud providers in this model?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you're aware within the with the GSM attack, STC is one of the main contributor within the model 2, which is the joint venture. As I said, we will not say there is a priority of one over other. So there are different combinations. We know today our customers, hyperscalers, they have a rich capability. They have good developer experience, tools of automation. So we know there are some enterprise of customers already, they are using hyperscalers. Obviously, today they are connecting their applications to their central clouds, right? Today, but tomorrow, the hyperscalers are bringing their boxes, which they can put in the customer side. So somehow, for a telecom operator, there is a natural, inclination if we mix or merge over connectivity with their solution and make it end-to-end work. And something, if it can scale, I think this is a valid thing. And as I said, it depends on the customer preference, because ultimately for Edge, how I see it, we should build a complete plethora of solutions, and we will give a customer the solution which they require. We should not enforce a particular combination over other. Right? So that's
okay. We got some questions coming in from the audience. So let me just turn to a question from Anandra. He would like to know, to what extent are service providers' internal skills and knowledge and education, how does that play with do-it-yourself cloudification? And then a follow-on to that would be, how do you compare DIY versus system integration when it comes to telco cloudification? Won't it ultimately drive service providers to do it yourself? So I'd like to get both, Larry, your perspective and yours as well, Ted.
Larry,
Sure,
maybe we can go ahead because I have a lot to say on this.
I'll jump in on it. So, yeah, we're building a cloud here. It's a different skill set than telcos typically. And in fact, it kind of ties back to what we were just talking about, in that you have the telcos. They may own some spectrum, and they understand how to connect all of that in the back end. You have the cloud providers that have the scaled out services, which are still going to be part of the equation, and you've got the enterprises, and they're already insisting that information stay on-prem, and putting a heavier thumb on how this all comes together, and need the appropriate dashboards and control. So it's much more of it's much more of a shared control there.
Sorry, I don't know. It's just reconnected.
Yeah, same here.
I lost this.
Live, we are getting latency and this limitations live experience. That's
I
why
lost the session as well, but it came back. I think we can continue, and apologies for the technical interruption, but continue your thought, and then we'll have Larry weigh in.
Yeah, okay. About the system integration, I think we have learned lot of lessons from our field practice from others, right? I think one of the key lesson the cloud journey has taught us over the years is that this is not simply you can copy from someone and clone it and it works. Why? Because there are just too many impacting forces, depending, as you said, your not only just the skills, your culture, the way people work, the departments, the organization. There can be a fine tuning required in your solution, adapt to your process, definition of the MVP when you go to TCO or because ultimately any technology I think is good, right? But when it comes to practice, you have to somehow tune it. I should say, I will never use the optimization, but to make it work, to automate it. This thing nobody can tell, because your combination, even if you select the X vendor, maybe in US, same vendor you select here, this vendor capability and tool set or things are not working in the same way, right? So I think this is very important thing that we all should do. So the telecom operators, I think I want to convey a message that the cloud journey is a journey of doers. Okay, it's not the journey of talkers. If you are not doing and you believe somebody else will do for you, so what will happen? You know how with SI, I give you an example, right? We expect an SI to be a good transient direction to reach our journey, which is to become a self SI. But I believe that if we select any big vendor as an SI, yes, they want to add value, but somehow they have some hidden intentions, right? So ultimately, again, as I told you, this open plus plus, this word I listen so many times, and I always, so it's very important to produce a new breed of system integrators, which are more centering on the software, okay, which can help you to automate the whole stack. But especially if you talk to the edge and RAN, we also need someone who really understands the telco brownfield or the hybrid environment. I give you an example on RAN, because I was listening some discussions earlier today and guys were saying, concepts of cloud and specs and this. I tell you this very clearly. If you don't know what is an RF, okay, when a site goes online, how the DT is performed, how the availability and retainability and this benchmarking has done, right? Simply you cannot swap the site, right? Same is the case going for the transport. As I told you, when just like I will second Larry, okay, when we go about the selection of this DUCU and the split, the transport is the key. As I told you, we have been doing something on the cloud RAN, and we have met with our field teams to understand really the benefits coming forward. And you will be astonished to see that because of the transport split and the vendors, how they are implementing, simply it cannot give us a cost advantage, right? So that is one of the reasons that we should. So somehow priority on the automation, and later on, obviously, these companies who can make data usage and AI, combined with your rich skills on the guy who go on site and exchange and this, he understand wireless. So I think that is why this role of SI is very, very important, and it is the way forward. And obviously, operator should harness. I think we should no longer make friction that we are not an R&D company. I think we should actively participate. We must build a house whose key we own. Otherwise, I think the experience cannot be very, very well. Right? So that's our experience and our journey and our suggestion.
Okay, interesting.
I would absolutely second.
Larry.
No, I just absolutely second that.
Yeah, I want to shift a little bit away from sort of the SI DIY and just come to a topic that I think is important for many people looking to plan and deploy, and that is around the security. So, if we look at the ability to secure an edge network, or actually many edge, because I think it's going to be a matrix type environment, how do implementation, design, and architects, how should they be looking at the network functions that were, at one point they were monolithic and now everything becomes distributed? So how do you secure that type of environment? And maybe, I mean, that's a loaded question, but I'll start with you, Larry. Maybe kind of give us the top 3 things that designers and implementers should be thinking about out of the gates.
Yeah, it is a bit loaded, but look, there are clouds out there. There are microservices, and there are microservices that have been distributed across multiple clouds. There's tooling to manage service meshes. To get the security, the authentication, and between the service components in the mesh, right? And also critically important to be able to monitor at a very deep level. I think that ability to watch what's going on and verify that it's doing, that your distributed system is behaving the way you intended it to, is going to be absolutely essential. Now, what the cloud providers are doing is increasingly moving the visibility and observability of what their network is doing down. Even it's now on the way into the switches. In-band network telemetry that you can. The more SDN ties, more programmable your network is, the greater your opportunity to actually watch and monitor and watch for very fine-grained activity going on in your network. So it's a vague answer, but it is, securing service meshes is understood, and we have to start applying and really looking at this. That's exactly what you're doing here. It just so happens that some of those microservices are running pieces of the RAN, but it's still part of the system.
Yeah, so would you see some of those functions moving up into the policy engine of like an SDN controller, where you can actually provide some aspect of security there?
Absolutely.
Because you're actually nailing up the connection, and you have visibility from an end-to-end perspective.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, SDN, one of the biggest powers it gives you is the ability to monitor and to close the loop. And so, I think, I mean, you can bring AI into that and machine learning and so on, and think in terms of optimization. But I think from a verifiability point of view, we're going to see that increasingly become an important tool in the toolbox.
Any Saad, I'll just come back to you. Any insight from your perspective? I mean, I guess I would say security is not an afterthought, right? You sort of, if you're thinking about it after deployment, you haven't designed it right. How are you guys doing it, and where does it fall in terms of the priority list versus other things?
Absolutely. So it's a very good question, and we have actually investigated it for a long time. We have been also contributing within the CNCF SIG and the CNCF conformance on these dimensions. So we have actually studied and got one basic thing what we understand, this all open systems over time, not on day one, they are more secure than the traditional ones. And what is the main reason? We all know that in an open and transparent system, we can test it through a third party. Everything is visible. So as long we can have control of our environment in the runtime, so nobody, these bad actors, or we can proactively handle all and mitigate those risks. So this idea that if we have a black box from X vendor, it's more secure than an open system over time. I again said, not on day one, because this is a thing we have to harden over thing, okay? When it comes to security and data governance, what we have seen actually, we have, you all know, especially this part of the world, this is make and break, because people are very dubious, even when we talk about something about, we use the word hyperscaler, and our teams are telling that, first prove us that it's secure, and our data and this and that, right? So I think there is two dimensions of this, okay? One dimension is to make sure our security is same or better than our legacy, which will really support us. So we have to really re-architect our solutions and make it forward. The other direction is they look at the SD-WAN connectivity, where security became a complete vertical market, where there are new and new companies starting to come up to sell the security solution, the SASE solutions, right? When it comes to infrastructure, I will totally second Larry. Today microservices has proven that a distributed system is at the end of the day more secure, okay? Again, I will emphasize STC, like our emphasis is on the software-defined architecture, where extension of the fabric through SDN and a future, not now, the NSM, especially in the Envoy. We all know it. This is some architecture is for supporting our whole cloud-native region, whether it is 5G core CNFs or the edge applications, or an application coming from the developer on this ecosystem itself, right? Then similarly, the multi-TLS, distributed TLS. So somehow we have the enhancements above the API, which we find it fulfills the security requirements. But again, the most important thing for security is you should have a multiple lines of defense. So, right. So you should not only see a software view, you should also see a solution where a physical site security, for example, an edge use case of camera or video, and even if somebody touch it, right, you can take an action in real time, right? Because maybe there will be no guard, right? So this is one of the dimensions we are seeing. The other dimension, as I said, is a complete partnership within, let's say, security companies to build a proactive. I know in the some IT companies, this concept of chows, monkeys, and this is something not very successful in a core site, but for edge, why not, right? Because at the end of the day, we can really exploit to sell security solutions. Because if our customer is asking too much, then we can tell them one base security, and then depending on whatever they require and enhancements, which at the end of the day fulfill their requirements. So somehow today, as we are grabbing our business requirement, this is the direction where we are looking for a tight security, depending on the use case and the requirements, right? So that's how we are taking it.
Okay.
So jump
Go
in
ahead,
with
Larry. Yeah.
just one little comment on this. There's one unique security aspect that we need to not forget here, which is the enterprise insisted on security and protecting its own information. So the security of the enterprise, frankly, from the telco or from the global cloud or whoever, keeping data on-prem actually now is a dimension of this that complicates the security story significantly. And I think it's probably going to be one of the driving requirements.
Yeah, that's a good point, Larry, because I think even from a regulatory perspective, many service providers, just through regulation, need to maintain data within country. So there's another pointed question that came in from Francis. So I'll throw it out, and either one of you can comment but his question is, who do you see building the edge infrastructure, service providers or web scale, hyperscale providers? And probably more importantly, how is it monetized?
Maybe I will take it. As I told, there is different use case and different capabilities, different segments. So we should not limit it. It is us. We should not divide the market just for the best interest of market, because we know at edge is a reality and the partnership is the right way. If I talk first about hyperscaler, right? We all know right now they are in enterprises delivering their edge solution, but they have certain caveats, right? We all know that, especially with this high latency and I should say high bandwidth and also massive IoT scenarios, which is bundled with this 5G and the latest telecom standards, right? I don't think so. Somehow hyperscalers is in a position to offer it on their own. And one of the main parameters, I think they don't understand the connectivity well. Let's be very open and clear. So to bring the capability of telco within hyperscaler, I think this is the right direction to move. And for us as telco, we all know that, especially I should talk about this region, right? Hyperscaler is ubiquitous, but when you go to find them, they are nowhere, right? For example, if you are a company, you want an contractual and SLA and all this stuff of security and this. And when an issue happens, you find hyperscaler is, they are not. So we, I think, are near to customers. We also understand the requirements. So if we build something together and independently as well, as I told you, where it makes sense, service providers must build at their own. But because we are now have to achieve the global scale, right? So obviously, if there is some enterprise, right, today is running the hyperscaler, obviously in the core cloud, maybe they have preference to go with the same tools and this. So we should not reject, or there is nothing good or bad. It totally depends on our customer needs. And this should be an option. But I must agree that hyperscalers should also think the same way. And they should join to build this telco initiative to build a framework, global framework, right, which can work across operators, multi-country. If they don't join it in the right way, then obviously there will be a friction. And in that case, I think it's very clear that if we don't develop the ecosystem in the right way, then I think it's not good for the market at the end of the day. There will be friction. Developer have different experience, and connectivity will separate from developers. So that's our understanding, and we are looking forward to see how we can.
Yeah. Larry, do you want to weigh in, or do you want me to move on?
I think I'll let you move on. That's fine.
Okay, great. So let's talk about the management of an edge cloud network. So if we look at management traditionally of the optical IP or access networks, it's always been multi-vendor. I'd like to get, and Larry, I'm going to start with you. What would be, in your mind, the best practice methods for managing an edge cloud? Because that seems to be the area where it's still uncertain right now.
Yeah. I think that the biggest point I could make here is that you need to. It's a cloud, right? So you're managing it using cloud techniques. You don't manage it using traditional telco OSSs. I mean, that might be there at some very high remote level, but you are managing a cloud service. And if you're not managing it with cloud tools, then you're not going to have delivered the edge cloud that you've intended. So, I mean, you manage it likely centrally. You manage it from the cloud, and you're going to have to offer it. It's sort of a joint ownership in some sense. You're going to have to offer the enterprise the appropriate control portals. And yet you're going to have to, as an operator, own the operational substrate. So, yeah, I mean, there's.
Larry, where do you see us on the maturity scale? If I gave you a scale 1 to 10, where are we on the management of the edge cloud today on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, 1 being lowest?
Yeah, so now it depends on how much you bring the connectivity into it. If we're just talking Azure being able to manage their edge IoT services, or Microsoft or Amazon being able to manage Greengrass, that's pretty much, they're doing that and know how to do that. But if we now bring connectivity into that, we're in a whole new space now. And the approach that you take then is you manage connectivity as yet another service. So from that perspective, we kind of know how to do that. So maybe we're a 6, maybe a little bit above halfway, 7.
Okay, all right. Sad, you want to weigh in on this on the management side? I mean, it's got to be top of mind for you because you're going to be delivering these services.
Yeah, absolutely. This is some very important focus area for any service provider, I guess, right? There is, I think, 3 segments you are talking about. Optical, I totally agree with Larry. Today, the direction is the SDNization. We have been doing POCs, and this optical and layer 0 is very important because, the traditionally, the way historically we have been managing it, it's one of the key pain point to become an efficient, right? Obviously, in the later years, we are trying to see multi-layer and all those aspects. But for the time being, it's automation, okay, or SDNization is the key. When it comes to IP, I think for IP in edge is a new definition of IP, and which is the NAS. We must, first of all, we build an edge solution together with the connectivity. We cannot no longer split it because this is the key sell point for an operator. And the other thing, everything must be available through an API. So whether we extend it through SDN to the edge or we make an on-off base or whatsoever, right? So that's very important. Then when it comes to SS, right? SS, it's very important to build a common delivery model. For example, look at 5G, okay? We have this RAN. So Open RAN, it makes sense to synergy with the edge, right? Then we have this SDN for the RAN and the site itself. So somehow this common delivery model, if we want to really bring this solution to the brownfield micro market, we all know, when our guys gone on site to do a swap, if we concatenate and make a synergy in that delivery model, is very in green field. You can have different innovative approaches, right? But in brownfield, to build this approach is very important. But again, as I told you, when you see this whole stack and solutions, you should see this from the upper view, which is the SI or automation or software view. As I told you, to consume this data to make decision runtime, because in edge, it's not just about this management or that management. You have to see You should consume data, make decisions based on data. So a concept of workload placement, I give you, we should optimize the topology or workloads over time, right? In a real time. Otherwise, we cannot just, there is just nothing like a pat in the edge. We should try to optimize pat in the form of cattle. So that's very important. We have a solution at the top with the real-time observability, right? I think that is where we should pay special emphasis in the coming, I think, a year or so. Yeah.
Okay. We're kind of coming to the end of the session, but I want to, I'll give each of you about 30 seconds to do a wrap. What potential mistakes should designers and implementation experts of the edge network avoid in early deployments? So, I'll give both of you an opportunity to sort of take a stab at that question.
Yeah, let me have a first shout. As I told you, because there are many vendors, different solutions, and without a clear homogeneity. I think this is the first thing I should emphasize. Even if today you have bring a partner delivering solution, but just imagine, for a big country like us, different vendor, different solutions. If your user is getting a different experience, a different tool set, a different testing KPIs, right? It's very hard to achieve the global scale. So this is the first thing, right? Then there is a common need to define the common specs and the common models, okay? And this should cross the over boundary of an operator in a multi-country, multi-operator context. I think that's very important, right? Then I think the orchestration and end-to-end slicing in this context, somehow edge is not a silo thing. It's not an island. You should see how you can, as an operator, just like one guy asked, where you see telco will do. Telco will do it if we offer a differentiator. So to focus on our differentiator is very important. Never build a solution. Don't try to become an IT guy when you know there is some guy doing IT from the last 20 years, right? And the final and key message, because as you know, as an infrastructure leader here, my main focus is not just the infrastructure, but also to see the application, what they require, right? Today, many developers come to us, okay, we are doing something in the last 10 years on the cloud. Now tell me how I can do it. So to understand it, when the telco service will come, right? So we should be building more clear relations to them and giving them what they need. And finally, especially in this part, a developer don't require hundreds of tools, right? Which they don't know how to use. So building a clear framework for the developers, let's say 10 tools with SDKs and testing, and where we can give guarantee it will work. That's where I think you should not miss this point to build
okay. Right. Larry, you have the final word.
Yeah, real quickly, avoid lock-in. I mean, we're in a space here where there are multiple telcos, there's multiple spectrum we can take advantage of, including unlicensed. There's multiple cloud providers with solutions. Ultimately, the enterprises are the ones that are going to drive this, obviously the larger enterprises to start with. And being able to broker and support multiple in all of those dimensions, I think is probably going to be critical.
Okay. Larry and Saad, thank you for your time. And I think this will conclude the session. We'll speak to you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks.